Friends, today we're going to Perth, Australia. And in the late 1950s, it was a place of quiet streets and open doors until darkness crept in. A faceless predator stalked the night, striking at random, leaving blood and fear in his wake. No one knew who he was. No one knew who would be next. His name was Edgar Cooke, a chameleon of chaos, and his reign of terror left a city paralyzed with fear. What drove this seemingly ordinary man to kill? Grab your headphones and let's uncover the sinister secrets of Perth's most notorious predator, the Night Caller. Hey, friends! You're listening to Cold-Blooded Serial, a true crime podcast, and I am your host and true crime bestie, Tika. Edgar Cooke was born on February 25th, 1931, to teenage parents. His dad was a violent, alcoholic teen who loathed his son at first sight. Why? Because he had a cleft palate and a cleft lip. Eric was the oldest of 3 children. And yes, all 3 of them had to endure their father's violent temper. Eric was subjected to daily beatings from his father and general neglect and emotional cruelty to lead him to believe that his father didn't want nor love him. His mom also suffered at her husband's brutality. She lived in both fear and poverty. She tried her best to be a good mom to both Eric and her 2 younger daughters. She worked long hours and barely had enough money to buy necessities. And the money that her husband did make, he only bought alcohol and beer with it. So he wasn't even contributing to taking care of his family. He was a very selfish person, selfish and abusive. So, Eric says that the only time that his dad showed any interest towards him was when it was time for a beating. And when Eric tried to protect his mom, his beatings from his dad was worse. Poor Eric had nowhere to escape. He was abused at home and then bullied at school because of his cleft lip and cleft palate. He wanted more than anything to fit in, but he was shy, awkward, and ashamed of his appearance. Both of these made him very insecure and awkward among his peers. So he began wandering the streets at night to escape his abusive home life. This poor kid, he was so afraid to come home that when he did return from his nightly walks, he would hide underneath the house. And that was all I was able to find on his childhood. So as a teen, he did have an operation on his cleft palate, but it left a visible scar above his lip, which didn't help his insecurities. And because of this operation, he now whispered or mumbled when he spoke. So as a teenager, he was frustrated by the rejection from just about everyone in his life. And one day, he's like, listen, I'm going to join a church choir. But he was also denied being a singer in the choir. And this rejection, this was his boiling point. He was so tired of being rejected. He's like, not even the church wants me. And he took his frustration out by burning down the church and ended up serving 18 months in jail. After that, he began engaging in petty crimes, such as breaking and entering and stealing from neighbors. He started to like this life of crime, and he began to cut out newspaper clippings of his crimes to proudly show them off to his peers, hoping that they'd be like, you know what, dude, you're pretty cool. Come on, let's be friends. All he wanted was to fit in with other teenagers, And he's been wanting this since he was a little boy. So the lack of love and acceptance from friends, family, classmates I think that drove him to become the monster that he became. I am not saying that that's a good reason to become a serial killer. I think in life, everybody just wants to be loved, especially from the people that are supposed to love you. And just to never feel that ever in your life, it's really sad. So now he's 21 years old and he joins the military. And he's like, you know what? This is it. I'm going to have a clean slate and I'm going to finally be accepted. Friends, 3 months after joining the military, he was discharged because of the amount of break-ins and burglaries and fires that he was affiliated with. So after he was discharged from the military, a year later, he's 22 years old. He meets this 19-year-old waitress. They start dating. They get married. And 6 months after marriage, they have a son. And a year after that, they had another son. And they continue having children until she finally has 7 kids with Eric. But the love and happy home was not enough for him to overcome the damage that was done to him in his earlier years. The charming man who Sally's mother thought was a good catch turned violent after their first child, and Sally was trapped by a cruel, violent, womanizing husband. And Eric still had his criminal urges. To the outside world, he looks like a normal husband/father, right? Like he works, he has a family, his children seem happy. But Eric is like, no, this is not what I'm missing in life. Like, I thought it was love, it's not love. And his break-ins and theft escalated into brutal and merciless killings. He had no set motive. He just began killing at random, and he killed all of his victims differently. What made this really scary is that the cops couldn't be like, oh, he's only killing women who look like this. Oh, he's only killing men that looks like this. No, he is just all over the place. He might be walking and he's like, you know what? That person's going to be my next victim. And he is like, hey, I'm going to kill them like this today. I'm going to kill them like this tomorrow. So his bizarre killing sprees included numerous hit and runs, bloody stabbings, strangulation, and shootings. He left the city of Perth utterly terrorized by an unknown maniac. Eric Edgar Cooke's behavior was strange and inconsistent for a killer, which, like I said, threw the police completely off his scent. Friends, oh my gosh, listen. This guy, I don't know if he's just like, obviously he's psychotic, but to do it the way he did, let me just tell you, okay? Because he's crazy. So when he shot his victims, every victim was shot with a different rifle. So it seemed like every shooting was completely unrelated or by a different killer. And then when he murdered up close, he changed his weapons. Some victims were stabbed with knives, others with scissors, and others were killed with an axe. So, like, you see what I'm saying? Like, what was his thought process? Because it's weird. Like, usually most killers have, like, 1 or 2 items that they might use. This guy is just like, eeny, meeny, miny, moe, and whichever weapon I pick up, that's what the next victim gets. There's no rhyme or reason. So, as the bodies piled up, it seemed like he became more wicked. One evening, he knocked on a random door and shot the homeowner as soon as they answered. Another time, he killed some victims after they woke up while he was robbing their house. Then he broke into another house, shot a sleeping couple, and left without robbing them or destroying the place. It's like he has different serial killer personalities within him, and every personality is like, hey, like, I want to kill this person this way. That's what it kind of sounds like to me, because how else do you explain it, you know? we've all heard stories where in the past, lots of people would sleep with their doors unlocked, which I honestly don't know how they did that, because even in the safest neighborhood, I would still feel too vulnerable. And in the 1960s, lots of people felt secure enough to leave their keys in their car ignition overnight. And Eric, being the menace that he is, took advantage. Almost every single night, he stole a car. But, friends, he returned it before they woke up to go to work in the morning. What makes this even crazier is he wasn't just going for a joyride. No, he was taking it to run someone over. During this time that he was stealing cars, he was involved in several hit and runs. And imagine waking up in the morning and there's blood in the front of your car. And you're like, wait, what happened? Because I was asleep all night long. Also, imagine the cops come to talk to you because they're like, hey, your car was seen by witnesses. Do you have an alibi? Imagine you don't have an alibi. Like, you're going to be locked up for a crime that you didn't even commit. So, police now are working hard to catch this man who's been terrorizing their city. And during their investigation, more than 30,000 men over the ages of 12 were fingerprinted, and more than 60,000 .22 caliber rifles, which were the type of rifles that he used in some of his murders, were located and test fired. But then, one day in August 1963, a suspicious rifle was found hidden in a bush. The police ran ballistic tests, and sure enough, this was the same gun that was used in the murder of Shirley MacLeod. Police were now ready to trap the night caller by returning to the location and tying a similar-looking but completely inoperable rifle to the bush with an almost invisible fishing line. Police hid as they waited for the killer to come and collect the rifle. Friends, 17 days later, Eric Edgar Cooke leisurely walks over to the bush to collect his concealed gun. And just like that, the horror in Perth was over. The police had finally caught the man who had put fear into Perth for 4 years. Eric Edgar Cooke confessed to 22 violent crimes, including 8 murders and 14 attempted murders. He also admitted to more than 250 break-ins and burglaries with remarkable detail. Eric went to trial for the willful murder of John Sturkey, one of the 3 Australia Day shooting victims. Eric pleaded not guilty on the grounds of insanity. So, let's talk about the Australia Day murders. In the early hours of January 27, 1963, a series of random shootings with a .22 caliber rifle occurred in the suburbs of Perth. The victims were a couple who were wounded in a parked car. Then, a male accountant was fatally wounded by a single shot to the head while he was asleep in a flat nearby. And the last victim of the early morning shooting was an 18-year-old student, John Sturkey. John was killed by a single bullet to the head while he was sleeping on the veranda of a boarding house. On November 28, 1963, after a 3-day trial, the jury only took an hour and a half to find Eric guilty of willful murder. The singular conviction, which was all that was needed to send him to the gallows, in which he'd be hanged. Despite having grounds to appeal his conviction, he told his lawyers not to appeal it because he had killed and deserved to pay for the crimes he committed. Still, Eric Cooke had one last thing he needed to clear up before he was put to death. Mere minutes before Eric Edgar Cooke was executed, on October 26, 1964, he swore on the Bible that he had been the real killer of Jillian Brewer and Rosemary Anderson. Daryl Beamish and John Button were wrongfully serving time in prison for the deaths of these women, they were innocent. Let's talk about it. On February 9th, 1963, John Button was celebrating his 19th birthday with his 17-year-old girlfriend, Rosemary Anderson. The young couple argued, and Rosemary decided to walk home. John Button followed her and asked her to get in so he could drive her home, but she refused. He stopped to smoke a cigarette and then began his drive again to make sure that she made it home safely. But to his surprise, he found her lying injured and unconscious by the side of the road. 17-year-old Rosemary Anderson died from her injuries later that night, and 19-year-old John Button was charged with her willful murder. It's crazy because at the trial, they found him not guilty. And then while he was celebrating, the foreman spoke up and was like, "Judge, I'm sorry, sir. I said the wrong thing there." And the judge asked him to redeliver the verdict. And the foreman replied, "Guilty, Your Honor." Friends, can you even imagine? Like this poor kid, only 19 years old. I can't even imagine what that feeling must feel like, because it's like you immediately went from like an instant high to like the lowest point of your life. During the trial, 19-year-old John Button shared that how 3 months prior to the trial, the police had beaten a confession out of him. Later that year, Edgar Cooke confessed to running Rosemary over, but John Button continued serving time for a total of 5 years in prison because Eric was also a known liar, and the police didn't believe that he committed this crime. They also didn't believe that he committed the crime of killing Jillian Brewer. John Button was finally released in 1968. Now, friends, we're going to talk about Daryl Beamish, the one who supposedly killed Jillian Brewer, the other young lady who the cops didn't believe was actually killed by Eric. So, Daryl Beamish was a deaf teenager who was wrongly convicted of the brutal 1959 killing of heiress Jillian Brewer in her apartment. Edgar Cooke confessed to killing her and was actually able to give chilling, accurate details of the crime scenes and the timelines. But the police was still like, no, I don't believe him. And poor Daryl Beamish ended up serving 15 years behind bars because in 1963, the authorities still thought Eric was lying. Now that Eric is on death row, he reads the Bible and he often speaks about his wife and children. And Eric expressed concern about the 2 innocent young men who were in prison for his crimes, John Button and Daryl Beamish. Eric, who felt guilty, went on a hunger strike over not being believed about them. And after years of protesting his innocence, John Button's conviction was finally overturned in 2002, and Daryl Beamish was acquitted 3 years later in 2005. No one from the city of Perth nor the state of Australia ever apologized to either of these men. Eric Edgar Cooke was hanged at 8 a.m. on October 26, 1964, 11 months after his sentencing in Fremantle Prison. He was the last person in Western Australia to be hanged. And friends, that's a wrap on today's case. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day to hang out with me, your true crime bestie, Tika, on another episode of Cold-Blooded Serial. If you enjoyed this episode, it would mean the world to me if you would leave a rating or review and share, like, and subscribe. Until next time, trust your gut, stay safe, and be aware of your surroundings. Bye.